Hello. We are going to go ahead and get started as we've reached the top of the hour. Welcome to the Upcycled Food Association Upswell episode of the day, Unexpected Uses of Upcycled Food. I'm Amanda Owenbring, and I'm the CEO of Upcycled Food Association, and I'm so delighted that you're able to join us today to explore a really fascinating topic. And as a membership-based global trade association, we're really delighted to have a fascinating array of members here to share their stories. So let's jump right in. As a reminder, you are here fourth in a weekly series that we're putting on at UFA to mark our 5th year as an organization. So I invite you to join our last session with myself and several distinguished panelists next week. And you can visit the link or scan the code here to find out more, as well as listen to all the recordings of all our sessions available at the website you see there. Just a few brief housekeeping notes. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be available to attendees as well as UFA members and on that landing page I mentioned as following the webinar. And as we go through our conversation today, we invite you to submit questions to the panelists using the Q&A feature in Zoom. We'll be keeping an eye on that and look forward to weaving those questions in today's conversation. We'll send a follow-up email, including speaker information, resources, and the link to the recording. So look forward to that. Pretty straightforward agenda today, so let's jump right into it. So I have the honor and pleasure of introducing our moderator today. So Kathryn Britton is on Upcycled Food Association's board of directors, so it is a joy to work closely with her in her role as Director of Innovation at Where Food Comes From. And as Director of Innovation from Where Food Comes From, Kathryn is a solution seeker who is passionate about challenging status quo and innovating in transparent and impactful ways with the goal of elevating food systems and adding value to the people and families that shape them. Kathryn, thanks so much for being here. Over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. Happy birthday to UFA. It honestly feels fitting that we would be diving into some of the unexpected uses of upcycled foods on the heels of the 5th anniversary of UFA. It took so much trailblazing on the part of those who started UFA to really think about how we look at food waste in a different way and define it. How do we define upcycling? And this movement has led to a meaningful and really impactful upcycling community. And it's that kind of out-of-the-box thinking that the panelists today are really going to help us better understand when we think about innovative, transparent food systems. And at Where Food Comes From, we are always focused on building a more sustainable food model for the world. And what's cool about upcycling is it really becomes the solution for everyone when we think about transparency and sustainable systems. And we know that there's maybe some ingredients that we are all familiar with in the upcycling space and uses of upcycled food, but there's so much innovation happening. And it's that creative, innovative thinking that is really going to leverage the upcycling space and have the biggest impact on food collectively, keeping food in our food systems and allowing us to feed the world. And I'm thrilled to be able to introduce these panelists to you all today. And we really want this to be a conversation. It's meant to be a dialogue, to talk about this innovative work, creativity, trailblazing in food systems in new ways. So as Amanda said, please send your questions in. We will be sure to be keeping an eye on them and get those in front of the panelists as we go through this process. But let me kick it off with them and they can tell us a little bit more about themselves. So today we have Jeannine Davison, the founder of Amai, Liz Weaver, the director of marketing with GTF Technologies, and Harry Mcllwraith, the general manager of Upcycled Beauty. And each of them have very unique stories in this space, and we're going to let them tell us all a little bit more about what they do. So Harry, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So I'm Harry. I'm the general manager of the Upcycled Beauty company. We've been around for around 4 years now. And fundamentally, we're a raw material manufacturer for the cosmetics industry, with all of our products being produced from byproducts So predominantly food waste, but also from agroforestry waste. And when we say food waste, it's generally the sort of non-edible fractions, so the parts that would otherwise go to animal feed or anaerobic digestion. So we're a manufacturer, but we're one with a vision that one day all of the products that are sold for personal care and beauty products are manufactured using and also packaged within upcycled ingredients. So imagine walking to a supermarket, a drugstore, or wherever you purchase your personal care products, and everything there is produced, is manufactured using byproducts. And so they're as sustainable as they can be and making the best use of the Earth's resources. I realise I've kind of been preaching to the converted, if you excuse the term, seeing as this is a UFA talk, but yes, it is our vision that one day everything will be upcycled. And we're aiming to achieve that via three main pillars. So firstly, to inform. So every year we publish our annual Zero Waste Beauty Report, which summarises all of the new innovations within raw materials, packaging, manufacturing, and lots of other things as well, lots of other topics. We also have our own internal demonstration formula range called Cherished, which shows what can be done using upcycled ingredients, and that there is many other upcycled ingredients within the cosmetic space. And then a second pillar is to inspire. So this is where we talk about what we talk at events like this, but also at sort of other webinars, trade shows, those sorts of things, and trying to sort of raise awareness of the zero waste beauty movement, the upcycling movement, and yes, push it forward as much as we can. And then lastly is to enable. So this is where we have our raw materials, but also we have a database on our website where we have over 300 raw materials that are upcycled. So for those that are not necessarily so aware of the personal care industry, over the last few years, there's been a big push towards having more upcycled ingredients, and many of the manufacturers have launched new upcycled ingredients or have kind of relaunched existing ones using better or more sustainable feedstocks for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Very interesting. Personal care products. I'm guessing a lot of people haven't thought about that yet. Jeannine?
Thank you, Kathryn and Amanda, for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm Jeannine Davison, the founder and CEO of Amai. We're a Vista, California startup founded in 2021, and we produce an edible cup made from 25% upcycled ingredients, including spent grain, upcycled oat protein, and upcycled pea starch. So the cups are nutritious, crispy, and most importantly, they're delicious. They taste like a waffle cone, only not as sweet. But they also hold boiling water and won't leak for 48 hours and are highly durable, standing up to freezing, refrigeration, and microwaving, making them a viable alternative to traditional single-use paper and plastic cups. Our current focus is on working with large caterers in independent coffee shops, zoos, theme parks, and K-12 schools, with a goal to expand into airlines, cruise ships, and sports venues. And over the next 4 years, we aim to recover about 30 million pounds of spent grain, which might sound like a lot, but considering that in San Diego County alone, where we're located, there's over 125 million pounds of spent grain generated annually. So we're really just kind of making a dent in that. And speaking to our broader mission, the cup, we like to think of it as just a vehicle to illustrate what actually can be done with this highly valuable, nutritious ingredient. And so in partnership with Net Zero, which some of you are probably familiar with, one of the pioneers, Sue Marshall of the Upcycled Food Association, in partnership with them, our longer vision is to develop a spent grain recovery hub right here in San Diego County, the craft brew capital of the world, and convert that 125 million pounds of spent grain annually into 40 million pounds of flour that can be reintroduced back into the local food system and repurposed not only for edible cups, but just about, anything else that you can use traditional flours for and grain. And so we want to be able to inspire others in the local community here to be able to use this resource. And then this model can actually serve as a blueprint for how to do this and deploy the capability in other areas of the country or the world where there's a high concentration of breweries.
Love that, Jeannine. I was just thinking when you said they taste like waffle cones that my daughter may have to consume a few of those with some of her ice cream. I think that could be a good mix coming.
Yeah, they're really quite tasty.
Yeah, that's amazing. Liz, you want to talk a little bit about GTF and your technologies?
Yeah, so I am Liz Weaver. I'm the Director of Marketing for GTF Technologies. And we've been around, I guess our founder started us 10 years ago, roughly, and have had a really significant focus on food waste the last 5 years and technology that enables our customers to transform their food waste, primarily byproduct side streams, more food manufacturing waste, into a powdered ingredient. So our product is our Renew drying and milling system, and we manufacture that and actually install those on site at these large scale food beverage processors. So kind of similar to Jeannine and her process of creating her product. Ours is just slightly different. Instead of a processing center, we're actually meeting the processors where they are, so that they can manage it all in-house. And we're talking to our customers are some of the largest brands that you would probably know in your stores that you go grocery shopping in. So these are people that are creating hundreds of thousands of tons of waste weekly, just on one side stream material. So that could be, your carrot, your broccoli, your brewer's fed grain, like Jeannine mentioned. And our technology is able to take all of that waste that's completely safe to eat and just underlooked or maybe not viewed as an asset right now, and transform that into a powder ingredient in about a second without using extreme heat or natural gas. And so really key for our customers because it maintains the nutrient value. It's a superfood ingredient then. And then is also really energy efficient. So they don't have to worry about any government regulations around natural gas use. And then the machine also has a small square footprint so that we're allowed to kind of tuck into existing production facilities without disrupting their current production. So we really want to make upcycling as easy as possible for the large producers that may not have been able to find a solution that fits their scale yet. And so the reason, if you're familiar with any drying technology, manufacturing technology, a lot of dryers are really large square footprint rise. And use a lot of natural gas and intensive resources. So that's why we're kind of serving them. And our mission is pretty simple. We want to positively impact people, the planet, and businesses everywhere. We think that upcycling is the perfect way to do that by using underused resources in order to feed hungry people. There's 800 million people hungry throughout the world, and we are wasting hundreds of millions of tons of food a day. And so how do we really change the narrative of that and create circular economies to not only help businesses increase profitability and lower their waste, but feed people in the process?
That's amazing. I mean, to your point, we know that over 30% of the food produced globally is wasted annually, 1.3 billion tons. And each of you in your own unique ways have really tapped in to start making a true impact on that. And I'm curious with those innovations, really what that starting point was for you when it comes to upcycling food. I think there's maybe more to that founding story that we haven't heard yet. So if you could give us a bit more information on where the food waste came into your stories, I think that would be very exciting for us to hear from you. Jeannine, you want to tackle that one first?
Sure. Our origin story is an interesting one because we originally were going to set ourselves up as an importer of an edible espresso cup that we had discovered in Europe. And we thought it was a really cool idea and couldn't believe there wasn't anything like it here in the United States. And we immediately started to think about how could we make this better? Like, what if it were a larger cup that could be used for larger size coffees or soup? What if it could hold boiling water? And it wasn't time sensitive as to when you would, have to finish it. And what if we could actually make it locally and save on transportation costs, but also the environmental impact of importing something from overseas? And so that's what we started to set out to do. But there was still one problem that was kind of in the back of our mind, and that is that with edible packaging, it really only reaches its full potential if people actually eat it. Otherwise, it's kind of gimmicky, right? And if somebody just took a bite out of the cup and threw it away, we were actually going to be contributing to food waste using perfectly, good ingredients for something that might not actually get eaten. And so we had heard about the Upcycled Food Association from our friends over at Misadventure Vodka, which is just down the road from us in Vista, and actually one of the first 10 companies, I think, that achieved Upcycled certification. And it got us thinking, well, what if we could make the cups out of grains that are typically discarded? And so that's what we set out to do, which was actually choosing a much more difficult path than the original idea of importing a cup that had already been, manufactured in Europe. But we really wanted to disrupt conventional thinking about food waste and single-use waste. So we joined the Upcycled Food Association and really had no idea how to start doing this. So on the Slack channel, I posted a message, does anybody know anything about upcycling spent grain? And that's how I became connected with Sue Marshall at Net Zero. And we got a really quick education about how to use grain. I started experimenting actually in my kitchen at home. And we raised some capital and commissioned a one-of-a-kind production test machine that was built in Austria. We built an R&D facility, developed a recipe primarily using spent grain as the main ingredient, but after a lot of spent grain is interesting to work with, right? It has this, if you've tried it, it has a beautiful nutty toasted flavor, but it can be overpowering. And we were trying to, figure out how to balance that, because taste was really important to us. And so we discovered upcycled oat protein from Renewal Mill, as well as upcycled pea starch from Purus, all ingredients that are sourced locally here in the United States. Those two ingredients added a new depth of flavor and some subtle sweetness without adding sugar to the cup. And that's how we ended up with the three upcycled ingredients. So out of our R&D facility, we're able to make about 2,000 to 3,000 cups a month in 3 different sizes. And we've test marketed now more than 50,000 cups in 17 states and in Canada. And we're in the process of scaling to be able to make 1.8 million units a month by Q4 of next year. And then, as I mentioned, in 2026, bring the local spent grain recovery capability to San Diego County.
What a shining example of the power of the upcycling community. It really took all of those players to come in and make that happen and share knowledge. And it goes back to how everyone can be positively impacted when we get creative about how we use our upcycled ingredients. And to that point, I mean, Liz, your organization has really been focused on how we get access to some of those ingredients that we haven't historically been keeping. So where in that process did the concept of food waste and diversion from food waste come into GTF's founding story?
Yeah, so I'll speak on behalf of our founder and president, Gary Schuler, who probably, like most entrepreneurs, like Jeannine mentioned, pivoted from what he thought he would be doing. But he actually was working in uniform sales at the time as an executive salesman for a large uniform company, and was just become aware of the amount of waste that one company had. And I think once you become aware of the problem, if you're mission minded and solution oriented, you want to fix it. And so he was able to redivert or reallocate that waste to a better use than a landfill where it was currently going. And in the process, actually found out that there is some significant tax credits. So he kind of framed the opportunity to the company as a cost savings. And then they kind of listened more. So I think that sometimes the cold hard truth about sustainability is that it has to pencil. And so he took that example of, how do we save money or make money and be sustainable in the process to other businesses. And it kind of happened organically. I think companies approached him and said, hey, I heard that, you reallocated 300,000 units of, mislabeled jam for so-and-so. Can you do, 500,000 units for me? And he ended up doing kind of waste diversion consulting, and then was approached more and more about food, and realized that the hard fact about food is that it rots. It has a finite lifespan, unlike hard or soft goods. If anyone is in the retail world, clothing is fairly easy to reallocate because you can just throw it on a shelf or ship it somewhere and it will be fine. Food is a little more challenging because once it's harvested, you have to do something with it. And that was right around the time when government regulations started coming a little more heavy about landfill avoidance and organic disposal. So he saw all of these risks and regulations and red tape as an opportunity for businesses, and sort of shifted his business model from consulting to food waste solutions. So how can I, use your food waste for a better purpose? And then about 5 years ago, he actually, with a team of engineers, developed a Renew drying and milling system, which stabilizes that raw food. So taking the rotting lifespan equation out of it, and then it has, shelf life of 3 to 5 years. It's equally as nutritious. I mean, I'm thinking, or was it, this is my breakfast when I don't have time to eat a normal breakfast. But it's literally just plant-based pea protein, cocoa powder, and fruit and veggie powder blend. And so these are all things that can be upcycled and used in products that we're using today. And so he kind of realized that and wanted to positively affect businesses' bottom lines, but then also their sustainability goals in the process.
I love that. How do we extend the life of the food and keep it in the system and maximize its use? It's so critical. Harry, it's obvious that Upcycled Beauty has had an impact on what it can look like from a scalability perspective on upcycled ingredients and how to identify those. And where did that come into the equation? I don't think that people often think food ingredients when they think of personal beauty products. So how did that start?
It kind of started back in 2016, 2017. Our now sister company was kind of our parent company, which is a raw material distributor in the UK. And they had a few raw materials in their portfolio that were upcycled. However, the manufacturer wasn't ever really marketing them as upcycled. They weren't ever talking about their story, really. And these were coming from juicing waste. So when raspberries and blueberries were pressed for the juice, they were taking the leftover pomace, separating out the seeds, and then processing those to produce an extract. And the conversation was had to say, actually, we could start marketing these in a much better way and talk about the story and then start something. And that was really the start of it. And the sort of portfolio grew with new raw materials that were developed. And in 2020, that's when the company became kind of independent from its sister company now. And subsequently, we have started manufacturing our own raw materials. We brought manufacturing in-house for the majority of them. And we've started sourcing, I say started, but we have been sourcing kind of feedstocks from local suppliers. So working with breweries. I mean, we work with spent grain as well, from local breweries and also other distillery waste as well from the distilleries, as well as many other sort of feedstocks from our local area. So we do try and keep sourcing as local as possible. Admittedly, we are then selling raw materials globally, which yeah, I guess we've got to market them one way or another, haven't we? Got to sell them, got to be commercial.
Very true. And I'm going to keep it with you here, Harry, because we do have an audience question that I think is really relevant to your portfolio of work. And that's specific to misconceptions that may be out in the marketplace around upcycled foods and ingredients and their uses. So what have you seen in your space around maybe perceptions or misconceptions when you talk about using upcycled foods and ingredients in your products?
Well, the two big ones that we get regularly are related to quality, and also cost. So quality-wise, people think because something's coming from waste, it's going to be of lesser quality. And yeah, we get that regularly. But just as one example, that the product that I mentioned before about the juicing leftovers, in particularly the seeds, we've been able to show that our product is better than a conventionally sourced product that's comparable. And it's simply because of the supply chain allowing for a much faster processing of this, the byproducts, rather than a conventional source. And we want to make sure that there is always a positive reason to use our product over a conventional one, or how to say it, a reason over and above the fact that it is an upcycled ingredient. It's not just a story ingredient. But then also, if it's waste, why isn't it much cheaper? Why isn't it free? And I'm sure the other panelists will also get this. I mean, for us, we have to, because it is food waste, we have to have a sort of segregated supply chain for that, making sure that our suppliers are not just putting it into a bin that's going to go to anaerobic digestion or animal feed, where they don't need to care about it. For cosmetics especially, the micro quality of something is to a far higher specification, far tighter specification than it is for pretty much any other industry, maybe bar pharma. So we do need to be very careful with them. And unfortunately, that adds to cost for a lot of them.
That's so true. And Liz, maybe this is something you could speak off to as well, just regarding that, what it takes to keep upcycled ingredients in the supply chain and how we get access to them, and how that may also inform some of these misconceptions. I know food safety has been something that I've heard about, and I would assume that that's something that your organization tackles as well.
Yeah, for sure. Fortunately, a lot of our companies that we're working with are well aware of food safety. You know, if you're buying, I'll use a example everyone knows. If you're buying a box of Cheerios, you know what your Cheerios are going to taste like every single time. It has to be consistent, and the nutritional panel has to match up every single box on the shelf. And so consumers expect that, companies need to provide that. And so it's kind of where we reverse the supply chain and go to, what's a copious amount of side stream material that we can tap into. And I think, brewer spent grain is a perfect example of that. Is it's high fiber and high protein and perfectly safe to eat once we process it. We have an integrated 5-log kill step, which basically is a 99.999 microbial reduction. And so it's completely safe to eat. And like Harry said, I think that, people often equate upcycled products as less than, but we find that a lot of the products we work with are actually the most nutritious products, or the nutritious part of the plant. So, the things that we don't typically eat, like skins, peels, actually have the most nutritional value. And so when we can get it into a powder ingredient and integrate it in, things like this easily, it not only helps with, companies' health claims and makes me feel good that I'm getting 20 grams of plant protein that's upcycled or could be upcycled, but is also just clean and safe to eat, and using those underlooked resources.
Jeannine, you mentioned taste earlier in your conversation, and I would guess that maybe that is a misconception that you're coming across as well when you talk about your edible cups.
Yeah, to echo also on what Liz and Harry were saying, that there's a perception sometimes that the quality is less, and particularly when it comes to taste, that it might not taste good. And that's why we made it such a high priority to talk about, not only to get the cups to where they tasted good and were versatile enough for a variety of applications, but to really emphasize that taste and the nutritional value. And that was also another pivot for us. I think initially we were positioning the product more as a single-use alternative. And then immediately people are comparing it to compostable paper and plastic cups. And that was kind of a mistake early on, to not really highlight the nutritional benefits and the taste and the quality of the ingredients that were going into the cup. So now that's first and foremost. The other thing, again, are the economics, the price and the perceived value. And let's face it, it's cheaper to throw food away. And that's why there is so much waste, because to actually recover it in a way that's food safe, that is shelf stable and can be repurposed, it does cost more. But I think in some of the prior panels, like one last week, there's talk about getting that price per pound of like the spent grain down to more of a commodity level. And, we're seeing progress with that all the time.
That makes a lot of sense. Having a transparent and authentic story is so critical in this. And yet at the same time, we're always trying to get ahead of what could perceived as misconceptions around what it means to use upcycled ingredients. I do see another question that's popped in here, so I'm gonna take a look at that. What are some of the unexpected inputs or uses of upcycled ingredients that folks on the call may not be familiar with that you guys have been engaging? Whomever. Harry, you went off mute.
Shall I jump in? Yep. I guess I'm probably going to have more than some of the others, because our raw materials can take very different sort of pathways than other food-based things. One of our, I guess, different ones is one of our products called Gin Tonic. So this is taking what's referred to as pot ale from distilling. So when we work with a brewery distillery that's about 40 miles away from our factory in southeast England, and they work with farmers based about 10 to 15 miles away from them in a sort of circumference, and they make gin. I mean, they make gin and other spirits, other liquors, but to make gin, firstly they make beer. So they make vodka, sorry, and to make vodka they make beer, and they brew beer in a normal way, producing, of course, the spent grain that we've been mentioning, which we also take for another product. But they brew the beer to a stronger level than normal, so sort of 8% or so, rather than the sort of 4 to 5. And then they put it into a distillation column where the alcohol is stripped out of it, to use its technical term, which leaves a sort of very horrible tasting alcohol-free beer. And we then take that. It would normally get flushed down the drain. It can be used for fertilizer. It can go to anaerobic digestion, but it's really quite dilute. And the brewery is in the center of a big town, so it's not practical for a farmer to come in with a big trailer and collect the tens of thousands of litres that they're producing per hour. Unfortunately, we are just taking a relative drop in the ocean of what they're producing, and the majority is going down the drain. But we take that and we turn that into a moisturizing active for skin. And it's 3 times more moisturizing than glycerin. And so very effective, relatively inexpensive as skincare actives go. But that's just one of them.
Jeannine, Liz, do you have others you would add?
Oh, sure. I'd like to talk about upcycled pea starch for a moment, because I think what's important to highlight about that was, even if you're not setting out to incorporate upcycled ingredients into your products, we found a tremendous benefit from using upcycled pea starch. And that happened just out of necessity. Originally, we were using tapioca starch, which in the years following COVID became very difficult to source from Asia. It's really expensive, and also come to find out it's not very sustainably grown. And we weren't able to get tapioca starch, and anybody, unless you had an existing contract like Nabisco, you know, with as a large volume demand for it, it was really difficult to be able to source it. So we had to find an alternative, and we discovered upcycled pea starch that we could get from Turtle Lake, Wisconsin, and we weren't able to use it as a one-to-one substitute, but with a little bit of adjustment, it has actually worked beautifully in our recipe. And so that's an example of where you might not necessarily be looking to use an upcycled ingredient, but actually there are tremendous benefits. And peas happen to be a very, sustainably grown crop. And again, also in the US, very abundant. And so there were a lot of additional benefits that came from substituting a traditional starch with upcycled pea starch.
I bet that, Jeannine, I feel like that would like positively impact the taste too, from tapioca to pea. That's amazing. One example that is similar to Jeannine for spent grain and Harry is just like a powerhouse for food, but then also plastics and compostable packaging. So we've done significant testing around our powder, which because it's such a small, ultra fine micron size, it can actually be integrated into packaging that you use every single day. So not only like your Amazon cardboard box and cardboard 6-pack that you buy your beer in, it can also be used in bioplastics in place of like PLA or PHA, and be completely compostable and biodegradable. So an example is like your trash bags. We've done trash bag formulation with up to 60% for spent grain powder, which is amazing. And then the rest could be, another sugarcane starch, PLA, PHA, to be actually marine compostable, which is really amazing too. So that's just one example. And then the other one, because I know that we've been talking about British spent grain a lot, is actually with apples. So apples have a similar property just because they're so fibrous, that can be used as compostable packaging in plastics as well. And I think like the example that comes to mind is those Chipotle bowls or any kind of takeout carry away container that you have that's that, natural earthy color. Those could all be upcycled materials.
You guys are fueling the questions. They are rolling in. So I'm going to hop right over to that. So Jeannine, this one is in particular for you. Is there a goal for Amai to make gluten-free upcycled cups to accommodate those with celiacs?
Yes, we're probably about a year away from that. But when we first got started, I don't have a food background. I have a manufacturing background. And so we met a woman called Deanna Smith, who owns and operates the largest independent gluten-free bakery in the country. And she supplies private label to Trader Joe's and Disney theme parks. And she's on our board of advisors. And so she has really been pulling for us to develop a gluten-free version, and she wants to manufacture it in her facility here in Escondido. So I think, the upcycled oat protein is a beautiful candidate for focused on a gluten-free version.
While we're on that topic, Harry, Liz, I'm curious if that allergen conversation comes into the work that you do.
Well, for cosmetics, it's really quite different. We have a very large list of allergens, not necessarily just the food ones. Fragrance allergens, there's 81 now that we have to list on packaging. And we also sometimes list food allergens, but yeah, it's a big consideration to make. Luckily, things like gluten-free, whilst it is a bit of a trend within cosmetics, putting gluten on the skin shouldn't have any effect for somebody with celiac, as an example.
Yeah, from our side, I guess that for spent grain being celiac friendly or gluten free comes up just because it is very low gluten, but technically not gluten free. So that's the only one that comes to mind. Otherwise, we're creating, consistent high volume materials or ingredients of one material. So like a raw carrot that goes into our system comes out of carrot powder, and that's exactly what it is. So if people are allergic to carrot, then whoever's formulating that end product or using it would have to obviously state this contains carrot. But from our standpoint, we don't have a huge risk with allergens right now.
All right, the next question kind of gets into the brass tacks of the value truly of upcycling. And the question is, with the new administration coming in, there's a concern that just the growing of food may be more expensive. So how would you and your brand and your business use the upcycling narrative to demonstrate that by retaining food in the food system, that we're actually helping to save value and maybe cut the cost of its production?
Yeah, I think this is a great question because if the cost of growing food increases, you're still going to process the food the same way, I assume. So if you're, buying your apple juice, you're still going to process apple juice in the same way you're going to grow the apples. Maybe they're growing less apples or they're changing how they're growing it. But from our standpoint, there's still that waste stream that needs to be addressed. And if anything, it actually is almost beneficial for the upcycled community, I think, because it offers an opportunity for these companies to look at maybe a risk as a benefit. So we've worked with some customers where we process their waste and they have a 2-year payback on that equipment. And that's honestly unheard of in a manufacturing facility. And then they have this incremental revenue and actually are introduced into a new market. So if they're only focused on fresh and frozen, now they can have this new ingredients division that allows them to have incremental revenue. So I think, framing it more as what can we do with these opportunities that are already at play is more the approach that I would take with those companies.
Jeannine or Harry, do you have anything to add on that?
So I would like to stay out of it. It's being based in the UK, not in the US. I mean, it's
valid.
If it costs more to produce food, invariably costs are going to go up for consumers one way or another. Fundamentally, I guess the closest similarity we had is Brexit for the UK, and whilst food prices have gone up, they would have gone up a lot more had the quality also not taken a bit of a nosedive over the same time period. But that's just the nature of people wanting to pay the same and market going the way it has to.
It seems that, so irregardless of the purpose, any ability to retain food in the food system is valuable and helps retain value, helps decrease costs, because if we're producing in excess, then we're increasing the cost of the whole system. So upcycling is really a value add for everyone along the journey, and helping to make sure that we're maximizing what we're producing and getting that nutrition and that food to consumers that need it. Let's see, we have 2 more questions. So I love this. The seminar is truly inspiring. How would you recommend one break into the upcycling space career-wise? This question is for anyone. So I don't know where to start there, but I love that. Go ahead, Liz.
Okay, I didn't know if Harry looked like he was ready to go. A tangible piece of advice, I guess, is similar to how we started this. It's just knowledge and awareness, I think, is key for any change. So like Jeannine's founding story and our founder Gary's story, just being aware of the problem and solution and how you can implement that even in your daily life of food. I mean, to be quite honest, before this, I worked in consumer packaged goods and hard appliances, so hard lines, and was completely unaware and just ignorant about food waste. And so I think, now that I know, I'm like, oh my gosh, why are you throwing away your banana peels? Why are you composting those at your house? But then from like a career standpoint, I think just finding organizations that align with your values is really important. And really looking at corporate reports on their sustainability statements and what they're aligned to and committed to. I think that's a really good way to find companies that are already doing that or committed to that. And then you could be the voice of adding upcycling to their portfolio if they're not currently doing it.
Yes, I was going to jump in and say a similar thing. I guess the biggest growth that I've seen over the last few years is at least in the UK and EU, is the food producers have started taking a lot more interest in possible uses for their waste, and have often had new teams and those sorts of things within their new teams within their, I guess, their larger team, let's say. And so I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunities within those kind of companies.
Yeah, and just a quick add to that is I think there's a lot of opportunities in the upcycled food space in very different disciplines. So if you think about what it is you like to do or enjoy doing, there's the food science, product development aspect of it, but also one of the biggest opportunities, I think, is in logistics and solving that problem of time. Spent grain spoils very quickly. And so the logistics of being able to recover it in a food safe way before it has an opportunity to spoil, and that's true with a lot of food production byproducts. People who can solve those kinds of problems and figure out those systems, there's huge opportunity there to make a big difference.
Yeah, agreed. I love that. And there's sort of a question that adds to this as well, which is, are there any specific training programs to know or learn more about upcycling and the upcycling work out in the food industry? And Amanda, I know UFA has some unique ways that students or individuals could engage with the organization. Do you want to maybe highlight some of those given the question?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. And yeah, I just did want to highlight our membership is really diverse, right? We work with a lot of different types of companies, organizations, but we do have a broader individual membership. $100 for annual dues brings you into this conversation, right? You can see the headlines of what members are up to, where the industry is going, what the science and the research is doing. And really within that, we have a $50 annual student membership as well. So we've had a research fellowship for 2 cohorts running, and that community will be expanding into a larger year-round scientific community next year. So really excited to be able to have the conversation in ongoing polls for folks exactly like those who are asking these questions, right? To be able to join the conversation and get inspired.
You're getting a little quiet, Amanda. I don't know if it's a microphone issue, but I think we got the value out of that. I appreciate that update. There's definitely a lot of ways to engage on that side. I know in the work that we've done and the organizations that we see in the certification space, there's so much entrepreneurial activity happening. There's a lot of fellowships and internships, and there's groups looking for people to help them innovate. And I think that's a great resource as well to learn more about this space. And there's one last question I'm trying to sneak in here before we wrap it up. So the question is, how does upcycled certification work for non-food products? So I may speak to that for a second, and then I know, Harry, your products have been certified, and you can speak to your experience on that. But really, the certification allows enrollment across a wide variety of types of items. The only parameter that would be in place for things that may be considered non-food items would be durable goods. So really anything that falls in the non-durable space that can be consumed by people or their households are eligible for certification. And the rules are the same as it would be for a snack bar in the grocery store or a beverage. You have to have upcycled ingredients. You have to be able to demonstrate that you're using those, they've been diverted from waste, and you're meeting certain thresholds for percentage inclusion on those ingredients. So it does have a unique mix of certified items in the space. We see pet food, we see beauty goods, the non-durable goods like the edible cups that Amai has. You know, those are all types of products that can be certified. So it is a very diverse space.
Just to jump in on that, so the UFA's definition of an upcycled ingredients covers, I believe, it's pretty much everything that starts off as a food-based feedstock. And for us, as a cosmetic ingredient manufacturer, that covered almost everything bar one of our products as it stands. However, there are many other ingredients, at least that we're aware of, for cosmetics that are upcycled but not coming from a food-based feedstock. One of our kind of little arguments that we've had internally is nobody is pumping crude oil to get Vaseline, and so whether Vaseline would be considered to be an upcycled ingredient. And so we, like I said, we have other ingredients that don't have the opportunity to be UFA certified. And so we are looking at having our own sort of mini certification for an upcycled cosmetic ingredient, not to necessarily compete with the UFA, but to run separately from it.
That is a good point. The food source matters.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we're going to wrap with sort of one last big picture question for you all. And that's really about thinking about the future. So when we look at each of your brands and your missions and the spaces that you work, when you think about the next 5 years in your industries, what do you feel are really the most important things that your organizations and other groups, you know, in your space should be doing and thinking about when it comes to food waste? Jeannine, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. I think for us, it really still focuses on education, especially with the product that we have. People look at the cup at first and are like, what? I can eat this? And there's always that little bit of a deer in the headlights. And so there was no question for us that we had to focus on B2B for the first 3 years. And so we'll continue to do that for the next couple of years. Where people are able to experience a cup at a ball game or a zoo or a special event, as opposed to going into the grocery store and trying to figure out even, you know, where would we place a product like this at retail? In the paper plates section, next to the ice cream cones, next to the coffee. And so discovering the K through 12 California school system as a huge market was really important for us, not only because there's 6 million students in California public schools, but it was an opportunity to take a holistic approach. And what I mean by that is that kids are learning about the circular economy and upcycled foods in the classroom, and then they can experience the cup in the cafeteria. And if they don't finish eating it, it goes into a special collection bin. And now they can see firsthand how that cup, they can stomp on it and put it in the school garden. And they're learning about composting. And so that's really our focus. And even further education through field trips locally to visit our production facility. So our focus is to really use that as a way not only to educate the students, but then that information comes home to their families. And now they're learning about upcycling and not just our product, but upcycling in general. And so that's really where we're headed in the next 3 to 5 years, probably thinking about retail towards the tail end of that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the blueprint for a spent grain recovery hub in local areas where there's a high concentration of breweries in partnership with Net Zero to really spearhead that and deliver that capability to communities as a resource for upcycled ingredients that can be made in all kinds of innovative products.
Liz, speaking of delivering the capability to upcycle, what does the future look like on the technology side?
Yeah, well, I love, Jeannine, how you mentioned shifting from linear economies to circular economies. And that's really our big, audacious goal, I would say, is, you know, on the corporate commercial side with these huge manufacturers, it's kind of shifting the supply chain to circular economy. So not really disrupting what they're already doing, just doing it a little better. So using those, planning our systems in all of their processing centers. We're working with one brewery brand that has over 100 brewery locations just in the US. And one of those locations produces about 1 million pounds of brewer spent grain a week. And so this is just that's crazy scale at how much is just overlooked, not used. And so our goal is really to make a huge dent in that circular economy and put our systems in to create these ingredients, to create sustainable packaging or nutritious food ingredients for then the ingredient sellers to market upcycled ingredients and health benefits for them. And then also just save on shipping and supply chain. I mean, the side streams have to go somewhere right now, and they're trucking it to animal feed or compost locations, and that still costs money. So shifting that whole scale is really our big goal. And then our mission really is to, at the end of the day, help make a dent in world hunger. So reallocate those really nutritious, healthy, safe foods to people in need. And now that they're shelf stable, it's really easy to ship them, into disaster relief or places and formulate upcycled ingredients. So that's kind of our company goal. And then I guess just like a tip for, looking ahead to 5 years for anyone that's in food manufacturing now, like our customers, we always say just start small, like start evaluating it, because I don't think regulations are going to go away. I think they're only going to increase. And I think it's very similar to plastics regulations, shifting from less single-use plastic to more compostable, biodegradable options. So even if you're starting small and starting to have those conversations, I think it's better than just ignoring it and hoping it'll go away, because I don't think it will.
Harry, what does the future of upcycled food ingredients look like in the beauty space?
Well, I mean, it's kind of our vision, isn't it, that everything will eventually be upcycled. I've been at a few trade shows recently, and many of the raw material manufacturers are launching new upcycled ingredients, or if not new, they're rebranding, reformulating existing raw materials. And hopefully one day it will just become accepted that that is the way that we work. I liken it to palm oil used in cosmetics. So 10 years ago, palm oil was kind of ubiquitous. It was in many raw materials, many of the commodities. And very quickly, the roundtables of sustainable palm oil became well recognized, and everybody started moving to mass balance palm oil. And when people started formulating, they started using different trade names or different sort of raw material codes for all of these different raw materials. And eventually kind of everything, at least everything in the UK that I was working on in my previous role, was a mass balance grade. And I kind of see that as how we will eventually move towards.
I love it. Thank you all so much for your insights and the work that you're doing. It's inspiring, and it's obviously very impactful to the bigger picture and the upcycling movement. So we appreciate you being with us and just giving us these insights. So Amanda, I will hand it over to you to wrap us up.
Sounds great. Well, thank you. And quick check on my audio coming through better. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you all for being with us for this session. I learned so much in terms of education and just inspiration as well, right? The world of upcycled food spans so many different both inputs as well as applications. And really this hour that we've just spent celebrates how that comes to life across the Upcycled Food Association network and community. So, as a reminder, we have one more session left in our 5 weekly sessions. So spread the word, hop on the line on November 20th. And definitely want to thank you for your curiosity in joining us today. We'll be sending and sharing this recording as well as all the recordings throughout our 5 sessions for you to come back on and reflect on, share in your networks, maybe send to somebody you know that might have the ability to integrate upcycled into the current work that they're doing. Our community is broad, and we really want to be the home of resources and inspiration for any company or individual, whether they have an upcycled product yet or not. So welcome you to check out upcycledfood.org to listen, learn, and keep in touch on the road ahead. A big thank you to Kathryn, to Jeannine, to Liz, to Harry, and we will see you on a next conversation down the road. Stay well, everyone.